he dragged the body hurriedly ashore, concealing it in the reeds, as if he were disposing of the evidence of his own crime. Then, to his preposterous terror, he noticed that the panting of the steamboat and the beat of its paddles were slowing as the vague bulk came in sight, until a huge wave from the suddenly arrested wheels sent a surge like an enormous heartbeat pulsating through the sedge that half submerged him. The flashing of 3 or 4 lanterns on deck and the motionless line of lights abreast of him dazzled his eyes, but he knew that the low fringe of willows hid his house and wagon completely from view. A vague murmur of voices from the deck was suddenly overridden by a sharp order, and to his relief the slowly revolving wheels again sent a pulsation through the water, and the great fabric moved solemnly away. A sense of relief came over him, he knew not why, and he was conscious that for the first time he had not cared to look at the boat. When the moon arose he again examined the body, and took from its clothing a few articles of identification and some papers of formality and precision, which he vaguely conjectured to be some law papers from their resemblance to the phrasing of sheriff's and electors' notices which he had seen in the papers. He then buried the corpse in a shallow trench, which he dug by the light of the moon. He had no question of responsibility. His pioneer training had not included coroners' inquests in its experience. In giving the body a speedy and secure burial from predatory animals, he did what one frontiersman would do for another, what he hoped might be done for him. If his previous unaccountable feelings returned occasionally, it was not from that, but rather from some uneasiness in regard to his late guest's possible feelings, and a regret that he had not been here at the finding of the body. That it would in some way have explained his own accident he did not doubt. The boat did not slow up the next night, but passed as usual. Yet 3 or 4 days elapsed before he could look forward to its coming with his old extravagant and half exalted curiosity, which was his nearest approach to imagination. He was then able to examine it more closely, for the appearance of the stranger, whom he now began to call his friend in his verbal communings with himself, but whom he did not seem destined to again discover, until one day, to his astonishment, a couple of fine horses were brought to his clearing by a stock drover. They had been ordered to be left there. In vain Morse expostulated and questioned. "Your name's Martin Morse, ain't it?" said the drover, with business brusqueness. "And I reckon there ain't no other man o' that name around here." "No," said Morse. "Well, then they're yours." "But who sent them?" insisted Morse. "What was his name, and where does he live?" "I didn't know as I was called upon to give the pedigree of buyers," said the drover dryly. "But the horses is Morgan, you can bet your life." He grinned as he rode away. That Captain Jack had sent them, and that it was a natural prelude to his again visiting him, Morse did not doubt, and for a few days he lived in that dream. But Captain Jack did not come. The animals were of great service to him in rounding up the stock he now easily took in for pasturage, and saved him the necessity of having a partner or a hired man. The idea that this superior gentleman in fine clothes might ever appear to him in the former capacity had even flitted through his brain, but he had rejected it with a sigh. But the thought that, with luck and industry, he himself might, in course of time, approximate to Captain Jack's evident station, did occur to him, and was an incentive to energy. Yet it was quite distinct from the ordinary working man's ambition of wealth and state. It was only that it might make him more worthy of his friend. The great world was still as it had appeared to him in the passing boat, a thing to wonder at, to be above, and to criticize. For all that, he prospered in his occupation. But one day he woke with listless limbs and feet that scarcely carried him through his daily labors. At night his listlessness changed to active pain, and a feverishness that seemed to impel him toward the fateful river, as if his one aim in life was to drink up its waters and bathe in its yellow stream. But whenever he seemed to attempt it, strange dreams assailed him of dead bodies arising with swollen and distorted lips to touch his own as he strove to drink, or of his mysterious guest battling with him in its current and driving him ashore. Again, when he essayed to bathe his parched and cracking limbs in its flood, he would be confronted with the dazzling lights of the motionless steamboat and the glare of stony eyes, until he fled in aimless terror. How long this lasted he knew not, until one morning he awoke in his new cabin, with a strange man sitting by his bed and a negress in the doorway. "You've had a sharp attack of tule fever," said the stranger, dropping Morris's listless wrist and answering his questioning eyes. "But you're all right now, and we'll pull through." "Who are you?" stammered Morse feebly. "Dr. Duchesne, of Sacramento. How did you come here?" "I was ordered to come to you and bring a nurse, as you were alone. There she is." He pointed to the smiling negress. "Who ordered you?" The doctor smiled with professional tolerance. "One of your friends, of course. But what was his name?" "Really, I don't remember. But don't distress yourself. He has settled for everything right royally. You have only to get strong now. My duty is ended, and I can safely leave you with the nurse. Only when you are strong again, I say, and he says, keep back farther from the river." And that was all he knew, for even the nurse who attended him through the first days of his brief convalescence would tell him nothing more. He quickly got rid of her and resumed his work, for a new and strange phase of his simple, childish affection for his benefactor, partly superinduced by his illness, was affecting him. He was beginning to feel the pain of an unequal friendship. He was dimly conscious that his mysterious guest was only coldly returning his hospitality and benefits, while holding aloof from any association with him, and indicating the immeasurable distance that separated their future intercourse. He had withheld any kind message or sympathetic greeting. He had kept back even his name. The shy, proud, ignorant heart of the frontiersman swelled beneath the fancied slight, which left him helpless alike of reproach or resentment. He could not return the horses, although in a fit of childish indignation he had resolved not to use them. He could not reimburse him for the doctor's bill, although he had sent away the nurse. He took a foolish satisfaction in not moving back from the river, with a faint hope that his ignoring of Captain Jack's advice might mysteriously be conveyed to him. He even thought of selling out his location and abandoning it, that he might escape the cold surveillance of his heartless friend. All this was undoubtedly childish, but there is an irrepressible simplicity of youth in all deep feeling, and the worldly inexperience of the frontiersman left him as innocent as a child. In this phase of his unrequited affection he even went so far as to seek some news of Captain Jack at Sacramento, and, following out his foolish quest, even to take the steamboat from thence to Stockton. What happened to him then was perhaps the common experience of such natures. Once upon the boat the illusion of the great world it contained for him utterly vanished. He found it noisy, formal, insincere, and, had he ever understood or used the word in his limited vocabulary, vulgar. Rather, perhaps, it seemed to him that the prevailing sentiment and action of those who frequented it, and for whom it was built, were of a lower grade than his own; and, strangely enough, this gave him none of his former sense of critical superiority, but only of his own utter and complete isolation. He wandered in his rough frontiersman's clothes, from deck to cabin, from airy galleries to long saloons, alone, unchallenged, unrecognized, as if he were again haunting it only in spirit, as he had so often done in his dreams. His presence on the fringe of some voluble crowd caused no interruption. To him their speech was almost foreign in its allusions to things he did not understand, or worse, seemed inconsistent with their eagerness and excitement. How different from all this were his old recollections of slowly oncoming teams, uplifted above the level horizon of the plains in his former wanderings; the few sauntering figures that met him as man to man, and exchanged the chronicle of the road, the record of Indian tracks, the finding of a spring, the discovery of pasturage, with the lazy, restful hospitality of the night; and how fierce here this continual struggle for dominance in existence, even in this lull of passage. For above all and through all he was conscious of the feverish haste of speed and exertion. The boat trembled, vibrated, and shook with every stroke of the ponderous piston. The laughter of the crowd, the exchange of gossip and news, the banquet at the long table, the newspapers and books in the reading room, Even the luxurious